YouTube, the real Jinzo here. First of all, I'd like to give a huge shout out to my fellow Jinzo brother, Jinzo&Tonic, for letting me do this deck profile on his channel. Today I want to show you guys that Switzerland is not only known for chocolate and cheese, but we do also play some serious goat. So today I'd like to show you guys my personal take on aggro zombie, or as we could also call it, zombie control, which you will see when we get into the side deck. So without further ado, let's jump right into the main deck. So since we play aggressive zombies, we do want to main the 2 copies of Vampire Lord. He's our main beatstick of the deck. His ability to constantly reoccur himself when he's destroyed by an opponent's card effect is actually huge. The opponent will have to think really hard to out this card. And also his ability to reduce your opponent's deck size when inflicting battle damage is pretty significant. I tend to always call traps, since most decks run a few copies of Magician of Faith, so spell cards could always be recycled. However, if you're able to banish all Magician of Faith from your opponent by Nobleman of Crossout, for example, I would suggest that you do call spells, since these are the best momentum changers in the game, which would allow your opponent to get back into it. A notable downside of Vampire Lord is his 2k attack, which can actually be shielded really easy by Gravekeeper's Spy, which at my local tent many people do play. So I do main the 1 copy of Ryokoki. This card is mainly here to outset Gravekeeper's Spies. Sometimes his ability to destroy warriors comes up, but that's his main ability to smack over Gravekeeper's Spy. Next, I do play the 2 copies of Spirit Reaper. This card has multiple uses. It can be used as an aggressive card to poke at your opponent's life points and then rip a card out of their hand and further facilitate your card advantage. Or also, if you play him in defense position, he's a pretty big wall which your opponent has to out. Next, to get your whole zombie engine going, we do play the 3 copies of Pyramid Turtle. This card allows us to directly special summon from deck any zombie monster with 2k defense or less, which is actually, in my opinion, the best recruiter of all because of his ability. You're able to directly special summon Vampire Lord, or if you need to, also Spirit Reaper. In order to make this engine even more consistent, I do play the 2 copies of Giant Rat, which can, when he's destroyed, directly tuner out Pyramid Turtle since it's a nerf. Also, we do play some spell cards, which allow us to do some pretty nice combos and style on our opponent pretty hard. Next off, since we do want to be as aggressive as possible, we do also run a small light engine, which allows us to be even more aggressive, since we then can main deck Black Luster Soldier. This card is an actual powerhouse of the format and is game-defying, so we do want to incorporate him in our deck. In order to do that, we do play the 1 Deary Warrior Lady, which is all around a pretty good card. You could set this card if your opponent thinks that you do play a bunch of recruiters, if he knows your deck, or also you can use it to out problematic cards from your opponent. Also, it's a light target. The last 2 light targets are 2 copies of Magician of Faith. This card is pretty nice. It allows us to get back any of our spells. It's not as central as for other decks, but it's always pretty nice. The last 2 cards which I'm playing is the 1 Breaker the Magical Warrior alongside with Sangan, which actually allows us to get access to every single card in our deck. Well, nearly every single card in our deck. We can get out all our recruiters, or even Magician of Faith if we do need a light target or need to fish for a spell card in the graveyard. And Breaker in the form of spot removal of spell and trap is always pretty handy to have. Next up, for these spells, we do run the Holy Trinity, consisting of Delinquent Duo, Graceful Charity, and Pot of Greed. I think these cards are staples, which do not need to be explained even further. The same principle goes for Heavy Storm, together with Mystical Space Typhoon. As said before, we do have sometimes a hard time to out Gravekeeper's Spy. That's why I'm maining 2 copies of Nobleman of Crossout. I think every game in every deck in Go should actually main this card, at least for game 1 if you're not sure what your opponent is playing, because it's most of the time pretty useful, and in our case can out said problematic Gravekeeper's Spy. For the same logic, we do play Snatch Steal, which can have multiple purpose, or if you need to, you could actually out said Spy with it. But I would suggest to you that you hold this card alongside with Premature Burial and try to use it as a game changer. You could use these cards to get back into the game if you're in a stuck position. With Premature Burial, you could also get back a Ryokoki and have a big beatstake on the board, or if you need to, you get back a Recruiter, which could then tuner out your big cards from the deck. Next off, as a one-off, I'm playing the 1 Book of Moon. Since we do have quite a monster-heavy deck, I do not really like to play Tsukiyomi. But you could bump this card up to 2, maybe even to 3, but in this build I am running out of space, so just a 1 tech Book of Moon. Sticking with the themes of books, we do want to play 2 copies of Book of Life. This card has multiple purposes. It allows us to get back a zombie monster from graveyard. This can be either a Recruiter in the form of Pyramid Turtle, a big beatstick in form of Ryokoki or Vampire Lord, or if you need to be more on the defensive side, you could get back a Spirit Reaper, or if you established a board with Vampire Lord, you could get a Spirit Reaper back in combination to poke cards from his hand as well as from his deck, which is a pretty nasty combo to do. And also the second effect of this card is pretty nice and has multiple purposes. You do need to banish a card from your opponent's graveyard, so if people are playing, let's say, Chaos Control or Chaos Gate, you could always banish their only light or dark target, which shuts them efficiently off from summoning Chaos monsters. Also, one thing I do really like to do with this card is if your opponent has Sinister Serpent in graveyard, you can punish them really hard by banishing it. Next, another multi-purpose card, which I think is actually one of the best spell cards in Go format, is Break Control. This card has so many uses. You could steal an opponent's Blackluster Soldier and try to go for game, or you could out cards like Gravekeeper's Spy. It's pretty easy and multiple purpose, so I think you could even play 2 copies. Maybe I'll take out the Book of Moon in order to find some space for Break Control, or you could also play Mind Control, but I do like the Break Control at the moment. The last 2 spells which I'm playing, since we do tend to run so many Recruiters, is Creature Swap. This card is actually pretty hilarious. You can take an opposing monster, give them our Recruiter, even Giant Rat or Pyramid Turtle, smack over it, get the absolute value out of it, special summon from deck, or if you want to be really sneaky, you could flip summon a Magician of Faith, get a spell back, then use Creature Swap on it, give them a pretty useless Moth in face-up attack position, and run over it for some significant damage, putting you even further ahead. For the trap cards, since we're a pretty aggressive deck, I do mainly 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. I'm aware that this card is a pretty high risk, high reward card, but I'm sure if you know how to use it, you know where the crucial points of your opponent's plays are, it absolutely pays off. You should not use it carelessly, try to hold it as long as you can, and the better you get at it with more use it will get significantly better, and I highly suggest to you that you try it out. For the next traps, these are pretty much staples in all of the decks. We do play the 1 Torrential Tribute alongside with the 1 copy of Mirror Force and Ring of Destruction. These cards are pretty useful if you need to protect some of your cards or if you want to close out games with Ring of Destruction. The next trap is the same idea to get you back into the game. We do play the 1 Call of the Haunted. You could get back one of your recruiters or one of your big beat sticks and try to get back into the game. The last 2 traps for the deck are 2 copies of Dust Tornado. I do really like the additional spell and trap destruction. Also a neat little combo if you do not want to commit too much spell and traps. If you're fearing an opposing heavy storm, you could always just set the Dust Tornado, wait for them to actually commit to the board, maybe snipe one of their back rows in the best case, then use its second ability to set another trap card which you kept in hand to the field. This way you can always protect yourself from a blowout heavy storm. Now let's jump into the side deck. I would like to remind you guys that this side deck is adjusted to my local area, so you might find the one or other choice a bit odd, but try to play with it. Maybe you find some other cards which are pretty useful to you, and use this deck list as a guide for inspiration of your own. So starting us off, I do side the 1 copy of Cyberjar. This card is actually pretty hilarious. If your opponent does not think that you're on it and has an established board, this card can completely change the game, get you back into it. Since we do run many recruiters and also Spirit Reapers, we do have a high chance of actually using its effect and getting us back into the game, and that's why I like to smoke screen into this card. Next off, I do play the 1 Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer. At my local area, not too many Chaos Gates builds run up, so I'm only side decking 1 card. In the worst case, it's actually a pretty big beat stick, but I'm sure you could bump this up to 2 or even 3 copies if you'd like to hate on Chaos Control builds. The next card is the 1 Asura Priest. We do want to side this card into if we play against Go Control or Standard Goat. It's an absolute powerhouse to clear out Go tokens, and it's even pretty useful since we do play Black Luster Soldier. It's an additional light target if you want to go that route. Next, as a one-off, I do side the 1 Exiled Force. This card is a neat addition and can be tuned out directly from your deck by Giant Rat, and it's another out for cards like Gravekeeper Spy, or if you need to get rid of a problematic card on your opponent's side of the field. Next, I do like to side out a few cards from my deck during games 2 and maybe games 3 and have a little mind game with my opponent. I do like to side out into the control aspect of my deck, hence I said at the beginning Zombie Control. With Scapegoats, together with the Magician of Faith in your main deck and Metamorphosis, you can also side into Thousand Eyes Restrict, which is a pretty oppressing card, and if your opponent thinks you're carelessly playing beater.deck, you can always take out some of the parts, maybe a Giant Rat or so, and stick with the control aspect and give them a really hard time, since they will probably have no inherent out to a Thousand Eyes Restrict left in his deck. Then, in order to out problematic cards on the board, I do side the 1 Lightning Vortex alongside with the 1 Smash and Ground. This is just player preference. You could also play 2 copies of Smash and Ground since it's a useful 1-for-1 Lightning Vortex. has the potential to clear complete established boards, but most of the time it's a 2 for 2 at best or a 2 for 3. For trap cards, since we're once again quite on the aggressive side, I do side the 1 skill drain. You could bump this up to 2 or even 3. If you want to be really aggressive, you could also main it. I know a few people which rather main deck skill drain over solemn judgment, but I think skill drain is a nice one-off. It can punish your opponent if you flip it at the right time, but at my local area most people tend to play much spell and trap removal, so I think the solemn judgment is better for game 1. Since we do play a lot of traps, I do side the 1/7 tools of the bandit. This could be also a royal decree, but once again, since we do have many trap cards in our main deck, I do not want to shut our cards off. And next, a bit of a funny choice. Many people at my local area do play flip control or go control, which rely on flip effects, so I'm siding the 1 royal command. This card completely shuts down all flip effects, and if you take out our 2 magician of faiths and side this card in alongside with skill drain, we're actually pretty fine and have no downside. The last card is absolutely hilarious. I always love to side this card in. It's the best feeling if you win against your opponent by reducing his life points with Magic Cylinder. Most of the time I use it against a few friends of mine which tend to play Sue Beatdown, and they pretty carelessly use Ring of Destruction, Solemn Judgments, and that's why I think this card is pretty useful as a punishment for sad decks. Since I'm siding Metamorphosis, I'd like to give you a few ideas which you could play in your extra deck, or as it actually called back then, fusion deck. So the most important card which you should definitely play as a free of is the Thousand Eyes Restrict. This card can be summoned either by using your Magician of Faith, which is a level 1, or your Scapegoat tokens, hence the name Go Control. Next off, I do side at least 1 copy of Dark Bolter alongside with Fiend Skull Dragon and Gatling Dragon. These cards can be really useful if you steal a card from your opponent, use their effects, and then maybe turn a Black Luster Soldier into a Gatling Dragon and further pop off. And the last cards which are notable, I think, is King Dragoon or Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon, which is just a light target, which can be sometimes pretty useful. That's it from my side. Once again, I would like to thank Jinzo&Tonic for this awesome opportunity to showcase this deck on his channel. Be sure to like and leave a subscribe. Also, if you have any questions or feedback, be sure to leave them down in the comments. I'll try to have a look at them and maybe adjust my deck to your local meta and try to learn from that. And if you want to see more deck profiles and in the future more Go Control matches, be sure to check out my channel. I think the link will be in the description below. And have a nice day. Peace out.